Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Malcolm Maestrel and I'm a Membership Services Coordinator with IAAP. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Stop Screaming into the Void, Getting Your Accessibility Ideas Heard by Those Above You. Before we begin, we have a few general housekeeping items to go over. Closed captioning is provided. To enable closed captioning, select the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The stream text link will be posted in the chat as well. Sign language interpretation is also provided. Microphones are muted to prevent any background noise or disruptions. Please post your questions in the Q&A. The chat will be monitored for general dialogue and technical issues. Today's webinar will be recorded and available in our webinar archives, and we will send out a copy of the recording and presentation to everyone who registered. And now I'd like to turn today's program over to our presenter, Cam Bedouin.
Malcolm, thanks so much. And hello, everyone, and welcome today. Thanks for spending a nice little hour with us here. We're going to be learning about some things that are not really talked about very often in the world of digital accessibility. It's going to be great. And if you've never joined one of my presentations before, you'll quickly realize that I do a lot of interaction. So everyone go find that chat button because we're going to be talking a little bit here. We're going to be doing some back and forth things, and it's going to be great. So just before I get started, I want to do a quick sound check to anyone right now. Please open up your chat and put in your favorite emoji. Everyone's got a favorite emoji. I know you do. Go ahead and put that in there. I'm going to do that right now. Mine's the ta-da symbol because everyone likes a party popper kind of thing like that. So it's all good. I'm also going to be practicing accessible presentations. You'll hear me describe images on screen. And just while we're seeing those last few emojis come in, I'll give a quick description of myself as well. I'm a 30-something-year-old white male. I've got a black jacket on. I've got a graphic tee of a beautiful Algonquin Park up here in Ontario. I've got some headphones on and a black snazzy accessibility cap with the hashtag A11Y on it. And with that, let's get started here. I have a question though. The US Air Force back in 1945 was facing a really big problem. There was way too many plane crashes. On screen, I've got an image of an airplane in a field, crashed, and looks kind of worse for wear. Looks like it's been there maybe for a while. See, because the problem was back in the days, pilots couldn't control their aircrafts. They didn't know why, because when the US Air Force had built airplanes, they said, well, we're taking data from a book that was written 100 years prior from a Belgian scientist. And they said, well, we've got all this data of the human body. This book had everything from arm length to chest size to head size, leg length and stuff like that. So they said, well, this is how we should build airplanes, right? We should take the average human body and just create airplane cockpits according to those averages. Well, it's kind of how we build technology too these days, isn't it, right? We build things according to the average. What is the average person? So at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the US, they decided, well, of course, the great American physique had grown, gotten much better, stronger, faster, and they remeasured all the men at the Air Force Base. So here's the second piece of interaction for the presentation. Everyone jump back in that chat. I'd like you to tell me what you think. Across 10 metrics, what percentage of men fit the average across all 10 metrics? It doesn't matter what the metrics are. Arm length, head size, chest size, leg length, stuff like that. Got some responses coming in. 20%, 10%, 33%, 1%. Christina, you're the first one I see. Christina Babcock is absolutely correct. 0%. Not a single man was average across all 10 metrics. And in fact, if you reduce that down to only 3 metrics, less than 5% of men fit that average. They'd built airplanes for nobody. It's kind of how we build, carousels and stuff like that in technology these days, right? So what happened? Well, there was a whole slew of new research that was done with a focus on adaptability. On screen, I've got an image of the foot pedals of an updated aircraft. And so you can see how the pedals can move back and forward. The joystick or stick shift has a linchpin at the bottom so you can raise it or lower it to adapt to the pilot's physique. And the amazing thing was that pilot performance soared. all of a sudden, the ability for someone to customize their world changed, and they were able to fly airplanes correctly. And in fact, this is also how the study of ergonomics was truly born in the United States as well. I've just got a big question mark on screen now, because what did I do? I told a story. I've been in the accessibility industry now for about 9 years, and I get so hung up on some of the regulatory and compliance and the guidelines that what I forget sometimes is that this industry is really about the people with lived experiences and people without lived experiences. And how do we bring people to understand those other people with the lived experiences? And I realized that people who listen to me talking about accessibility, they really want to know that human connection. They really want to know more of the stories, and they want to know more of the why behind it. So do like what I just did right now. I start with stories. I start with information. I start with something that's not compliance-based and not lawsuits. And the benefits are, now you all know how cockpits were designed properly back in the days. And this is going to be a benefit to any time travelers out there. If you go back, maybe you can save a few lives. But people realize that this question has been going on for a long time. The whole idea of adaptability and how do we actually communicate. So not focusing on stats, not focusing on lawsuits, because people don't connect with those. People don't connect with developer stories or testing or screen readers, really. I want to say, let's bring back that human connection and make accessibility relevant to the people who are listening. Because what we need right now in our industry are more champions. We need more advocates and specialists and consultants and developers and designers and leaders and testers and everything across the board. We need people who can just care. And I can actually prove that as well. Up on screen, I've got an image, a screenshot of LinkedIn of last year. And it says more companies are looking to hire accessibility specialists. And in bold, I've put below that the number of job listings with accessibility in the title grew by 78% in the year ending from July last year to the previous 12 months. And this is a result of the pandemic, right? Employees found that their accessibility accommodations were inadequate for them to even be able to do work at home. And when I saw this article, I thought, well, this is actually great news for us, right? In the industry, it sounds like companies are finally starting to care about accessibility in everything that they do. But I still heard from other accessibility professionals that, we just can't get people to care. Like, they don't want to listen to me. I go into meetings and I'm still kicking down doors. And it's amazing because we're right now in a golden age of information, and people are realizing that this is an important topic, yet we still feel internally like this is a frustrating situation to be in. And I'll agree, by the way, I'll be the first one to say that as a developer, when I started out, I did no sales. I didn't do any presentations. In fact, a lot of developers at large organizations, I worked at IBM before, I was told, shush, Cam, don't say anything. Don't speak up in client meetings. We don't want to hear you. They would bring developers to those meetings in case the client had questions, but shh, don't talk, right? We don't want developers to speak up at the time, maybe during demo day or something like that. So the reason I'm telling you that is because I wasn't trained on how to do presentations or convince people that accessibility is important. But that's kind of what we're doing, right? A lot of developers, designers are put into these situations where we are now the accessibility subject matter experts. And we're expected to sell accessibility. We're expected to sell advocacy and convince people to care about accessibility. Up on screen, I've got an image of 5 people looking up at what looks like probably an eclipse. They've got eclipse glasses on. And I don't need a poll to know that you're interested and passionate about accessibility. Heck, here we are at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday learning about accessibility. And yet, how did you get into it? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a guide? Or were you someone like me who was just thrown the accessibility guidelines, the WCAG, and just told to figure it out, right? In what other career do we know that we're just told to go figure it out? How many electricians are out there who are just, yeah, go work on that electrical panel. You'll figure out what the red wire, the white wire, and the black wire do. Just go figure it out. What about sales reps, right? Sales reps are taught techniques and meeting etiquette and how to use verticals and presentations and body language in sales presentations. But We don't get that. As professionals, as accessibility experts, we don't get that. We read the guidelines and we read more articles and learn about those lived experiences. We learn about tools. We learn about screen readers and Dragon Natural Speak and WordPress plugins and overlays and Lighthouse and color contrast analyzer. But those are all the how of accessibility. Where's our interpersonal skills? Where's our persuasion and communication and selling and coaching skills that are, I would say, critically important to this industry as well? What about things like conducting proper presentations or how to be engaging? Those are all skills too that we can learn and we should be fostering in our professional environment. And I guarantee that you've probably done some kind of lunch and learn, which is beyond, which you hope is beyond just that initial knowledge transfer and technical skills kinds of thing. Miriam, like your comment there. And I can't talk about all those things. I can't teach you how to be a good salesperson. I'm not a great salesperson, but what we can talk about is where to start. So today, that's exactly what we're going to do. Stop screaming into the void, getting your accessibility ideas heard by those around you, because I want there to be a new outcome and a new approach to how we're communicating accessibility. It could be to your boss, to your leader, to your stakeholder, to your client, or even just your team. Because I know that you don't need to be an expert in sales to learn some of these things. Because in fact, you're already good at doing this because you already know empathy. And that's the key to most things that we're going to be talking about here today. So this presentation is about success and forward thinking and how it's the right thing to do. And I think that we all know about that. And this is about you. It's how good you are at what you currently do and how you can pivot to going to learn some of these new skills, just some quick techniques on how to improve the way that you talk about accessibility to your team. It's about empathy building and about some basic speaking skills as well. Because I'll tell you from personal experience, once when I was working at a accessibility consulting firm, I had a client who she knew nothing really about the technical stuff. She was a project manager around accessibility for her company. And she was told, go do the accessibility project. She was my only liaison between myself, the accessibility audit, the person who helped out with that, and her team who needed to learn those skills. So all I could talk to her was about mindset and non-technical skills and empathy. And then the interesting thing is that now she has left that organization. And now actually she works for a nonprofit who helps new immigrants, refugees, and people with disabilities find jobs in the tech world. So I think something like that may work. Because this is also our job, isn't it? Creating more advocates for accessibility. So let's get started here. Number one, firstly, it's not about you. Okay, so on screen, going to describe this right now. I've got 7 characters on screen. Number 1 as the big character on top. She's your leader, right? I've got her as the pirate. I almost said a pirate captain, but she's not. She's just a pilot. And then I've got 6 employees as representing a part of the team there. You, of course, are the space astronaut right there. It looks like green or orange. I'm colorblind. I can't really tell, but that's you. That's me. That's the accessibility consultant on the team. Today, we're going to work on something together. We're going to try and convince the boss, this lady up here, that she needs to remove a carousel from the project because it doesn't work really well anyways, right? They were part of the business requirements, but anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Just to kind of give her a persona here, her name is Cassie, and she's a product owner. So everyone, if you could just find that chat one more time. I've got Cassie off to the left here. We're just going to do a little bit of role play here right now. What are some of the professional responsibilities that Cassie may have as a product owner of, let's just say, a fintech company, something like that? Usually I hear things like she has to manage KPIs. Maureen says, follow the money, make it pretty, strategic alignment. Thanks, Grace. Caitlin says budget. Yeah, budget and time constraints. Smithers says, just ship it. Yeah. Josh, I don't know if you grabbed that from the, for the fact that she's a pilot or a captain, but anyway, it all works together. I'd say there's things like hiring. She may have to do something like mentorship or strategic planning, budget allocation, or collaborate with tech and team products and stuff like that. All right, fine. Let's move this to personal responsibilities now. what are some things that could be affecting Cassie's job right now as part of what she's doing? They're nothing to do with the job itself, but her personal responsibilities. What could be going on there as well? Maybe she's got fear of failure. Yeah, Catherine, you said the pandemic, ableism, biases, conflicting priorities, stress. I put in some here as well. She's maybe a mom. Maybe she has some family issues at home. Yes, daycare issues. Right now, geez, I could not find a daycare for my son for the last month of school, and that has just thrown everything off. Good thing it's summertime now. Maybe she has a long commute to work. Maybe she's a volunteer. Maybe she's about buying a house right now, which is impossible here in Toronto. Maybe she's got insomnia because of it as well. Interestingly enough, I ask these same questions at a lot of the presentations that I do. And I always ask afterwards, well, where is accessibility in this, right? It's not part of the professional responsibilities, yet we are trying to put it as part of her professional responsibilities in our role, right? Cassie may have all these other really competing priorities in her workforce right now. What she has to do as a day-to-day basis is so important. And we come in and we put on accessibility on top of that stack as well. So I used to go into teams and say, you should care about accessibility right now, right? It's important for you to care now. When accessibility is just one more important thing in that long list of important things that's going on with her mind right now. And when she's dismissive and she says, yeah, I'll get to accessibility. We'll get to it at the end of the sprint. We'll get to it at the end of the project. We'll do it after the release. Maybe that triggers some people on the call right now, right? That hurts. I know I've been there. I've been there after speaking and trying to convince people to do the right thing, and yet they don't, right? I've pitched accessibility to sales teams and dev teams and design teams, and I've actually worked to build an accessibility center of excellence with a team, and then the whole department was shut down. But we take that personally, don't we? And we say, well, why aren't you taking action right now? So let's try and get her to change her perspective. Maybe we need to start with our perspective first, right? Something called the curse of knowledge, which I like to talk about a lot. In fact, there's a medical term for this called cognitive bias. Siobhan, you're absolutely right. After the release is just too late, but cognitive bias is that whole idea of you were not always the expert or the champion of accessibility. Now that you have perspective, now that you have knowledge built up, we've forgotten what it's like to be a brand newbie at accessibility. If I came in and started talking, I do woodworking on the side. If I came in and started talking about dovetails and glue ups and Padook, I would probably lose a lot of people in this conversation, in this meeting, if I didn't give some reference, if I didn't start us off brand new. You'd be asking something, what's this guy on about? So we need to realize that when we will try and convince people that this is the right thing to do, they may have a baseline which is completely different from ours. I mean, I like to tell people that my role is I'm Cam, the professional speaker who speaks on disability inclusion. I'm not Cam, a developer who kind of knows something about alt texts, sometimes. Accessibility is part of our identity because we've made it that way through experience and knowledge and learning, but that may not be someone else's lived experience either. See, because I have a theory. Up on screen, I've got an arrow that goes from left to right with some labels across it. And I've got a heading on there that says the engagement journey. And this is typically how people move from one idea to the next, isn't it? They start at a level of ignorance, and then move to pity, and then move to sympathy, then towards empathy, and finally towards compassion. In fact, I've got a story. I have a friend whose daughter was recently diagnosed with childhood arthritis. I'll admit, I didn't even know that children could get arthritis, right? This is something that I was ignorant towards. Let's just go through a quick mental exercise of what maybe someone would be thinking about if they saw a child who was walking with a limp. In fact, because of the reduced blood flow in her knees, one of her legs is now shorter than the other one. I didn't know this was possible. But a stranger who's looking out in the park and seeing this young child run around with a limp may be thinking, what's that parent doing? Not enough running outside, too much Nintendo, had too much sugar, not enough vegetables, totally ignorant towards what the medical condition of this child may be. What about pity? Oh, poor child, right? Oh, never gonna live a normal life, right? We've heard that from people before too, right? As we start talking about accessibility. Well, let's move towards sympathy now. Oh, well, that really sucks. I've got a cousin who outgrew their arthritis, right? As we start to move towards that empathy and compassion level, that's where things really start to change. If my friend comes to me and when she shared that with me, I said, thanks very much for sharing. I hope there's something I can do. And if you move towards compassion, you're still volunteering more. That's really big news. How can I help? I'll still volunteer to babysit her if ever you need to. Now, if you're in this room, if you're listening to this presentation right now, you, my fellow space astronaut, is probably sitting towards the right side of this arrow. You're probably in that empathy or compassion level towards disability inclusion or accessibility. But your boss, your peers, your team may be much further left. They may be in this pity or sympathy level. I've got the other captains or pilots on the left-hand side here. Cassie may never have even met someone with a disability. How do you know? Maybe you are going to be the first person to introduce her to a video or a story around disability that she's never experienced before. How did you progress on your journey? What was your starting point? Maybe there's something there that you can start to leverage to teach her to start on this journey as well. Because I'll tell you what, 9 years ago, when I was working at a large consulting firm, I met my friend who's blind. And at this consulting firm, if you've never worked in one before, lots of A-type personalities, right? People who came from sales before, managers and things like that. And they walked up to my friend and they stuck out their hand and said, "Hi, John, my name's Al," right? And if you're blind, you don't know a hand is in front of you. On screen, I've got an image of a hand outstretched facing towards you, and they would sit there. And of course, A-type personalities are looking for who's going to flinch first. A hand is extended, but not received. So I didn't want that to happen to me. I ran back to my computer. I typed on YouTube. I said, "How to shake a blind person's hand." I didn't know any better. This is how I started in the industry. And I realized that all I needed to do is walk up to someone and say, "Hey, John, my name is Cam. Can I shake your hand?" And then the handshake came. We don't know how to act if nobody tells us how to. And it's okay not to know, because we're not taught how to interact around people with disabilities in our day-to-day lives. Our parents don't teach us normally. I'm saying just in general. Our HR departments don't create opportunities or speak around this too. Our teachers, our educators at school, I'm not sure about you, but I never learned how to interact with someone with a disability at school either. It's not part of the regular curriculum. So by going out and learning and teaching little cues like this, we can start to build that empathy level towards our bosses, our peers, our leaders, and our clients by just having these regular conversations. They don't know either. On screen, I've got an image of a small kid in a shark costume. Not baby shark, but close enough. And I like to remind people to say baby steps, right? Maybe it's the 10th time that we try to convince someone to care. And that's tough, right? We have to start so small. We have to start tiny and assume that people who are hearing accessibility for the very first time have never heard or thought about it before. And that's okay. It's also our job to make it important in their minds. It's also our job to convince and persuade people to care about accessibility. So how do we start to change people's perspective? Part 2, I use the view. On screen, I've got the word view with a pair of sunglasses. So view is an acronym that I like to use whenever I talk about an important subject. And I want people to change, to listen first and then speak afterwards, right? I used to jump right to solutioning, to say something like, here's what you need, you need this right away. Imagine if a doctor came in and just threw some pills at you before actually understanding what the problem was. So I call these the 4 aspects of calibrated communication. So number 1 is your voice, not only the words that come out of your mouth, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Next up are your inquiries, the questions that you ask. Number 3 is your engagement, the environment around how you're going to speak about something. And finally, the words that you use to communicate your ideas. And I'm going to be using accessibility examples, but I tend to use this in other ways of communication as well, even asking for a raise. If you're a boss and your employees here, I'm sorry. I have heard that happen before where someone's asked for a raise after this. So good luck. And if you keep this in mind, you'll go far with important conversations. So let's start with the voice, okay? On screen, I've got an image of a microphone with the word voice and really being heard on screen. And these are not just This isn't just your voice, but whatever tool that you're using for communication. In fact, marketers have something called the rule of 7. It takes an average of 7 times before someone will take action, usually something like buying a product or service. And I'll tell you what, I'm not better than a marketer when I try and convince people about accessibility. So don't think that my clients or my teams always listen to me every single time either. Heck, I can't even get my 7-year-old to listen to me most of the time. But so let's give an example of how something like this would normally go, right? We go and introduce ourselves to a team, maybe the leader, let's talk about Cassie again. And we say, hey, have we thought about accessibility? Can I come help you with accessibility? And she says, nah, let's worry about that at the end of the sprint. I saw some comments in there earlier about the end of the sprint is not the right answer. And you're absolutely right. But she says, nah, not right now. All right, sure. What if you went to the developer and said, hey, how's it really going with accessibility? And he says, oh, geez, the client is starting to ask about accessibility and we didn't even know where to start, right? Okay, well, maybe I'll start to send a funny video, or maybe I'll start to send something, an easy video on how to talk about accessibility or disability inclusion, something like that, a lived experience. People like learning about this, especially in tech. I've had a lot of success sending videos about people building prosthetics out of like Lego or 3D printing. That is a huge success for me. Maybe that's something that would work for you. A week later, you can go ask Cassie again, what do you think about accessibility now? Could we start talking about it? I hear your developers are having some issues with that. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll still think about it later. We have no time this sprint. We're in a rush, things like that. You can maybe just offer, what about a lunch and learn? We can just do a fielding of questions and ask me anything, and we can get this started. And then she'd come back and say something like, well, sure, let's do a lunch and learn this Friday. In that story, I've asked Cassie and the team about 5 times before really getting involved in their team around accessibility. And it wasn't really until the last time where I was actually heard and the importance was actually was leveraged. So finding your voice, using different ways, videos, email, meetings, of course, lunch and learns and things like that. Because a no is not a no forever, just a no for now. I like to think of your voice as the persistent and effective way to get your message across. Some other ways you could use it. We've mentioned a few right now. Ask the experts are really, really great. One-page reports, stories, lived experiences. In fact, if you go on YouTube, there's a British video. If anyone remembers it in the chat, just pop it in there, where they were talking about bringing QR codes to products so that people with vision impairments can just scan with their phone, scan the QR on the product to read the label. What was really interesting is the group who created that had a pop-up shop where they had a bunch of products with blank labels on it. I love sharing that story because it's a really great way for people to visually see what it must be like to live with a visual impairment. Be omnipresent, be everywhere, and be politely annoying is what I like to say. Challenge yourself to try 3 different ways of engaging with your team that you haven't tried before, and try that over the next couple of weeks if you're not getting that true buy-in. Next up are inquiries, asking questions of the actual receiver itself. When was the last time you cared about someone who didn't care about you? We really need to learn more about the people or the team that we're talking to understand what they care about and what are the business reasons that they are involved or taking in accessibility. How do we make accessibility relevant to that audience? Well, we do so by asking more questions because, right? Remember, it's not about you, it's about them. My brother is always trying to solution things for me. If ever I come up with saying there's a problem, family, right? He tries to fix the problem before he really understands what the problem actually is. So to change a team, a client's perspective, we just need to ask more questions. I love open-ended questions for this. You're asking, when did you? Things like, when was the last time that we looked at that accessibility backlog? It's 3,000 issues long, right? What are the plans for the next release? What are your concerns about the audit we just received? What are some of our team goals around accessibility? Can I help you create them? When can I host a lunch and learn? We already talked about that. What team member could I borrow some time from to make them an accessibility expert as well? So you don't always have to come to me. Who really owns accessibility here on the team? By asking those open-ended questions, we can encourage conversation through the who, what, when, where, why questions. Because if you meet resistance through a team, open-ended questions really are the only way that you can get people talking about what they need. Number 3 is engagement, part of the view process, because we are now more disconnected than ever before, especially because of the pandemic and remote work. And I love remote work, but I do check my phone when I'm in meetings. We all do it, right? We're all feeling that disconnect. And that's just the way that we do things now. I'm at home, no one's checking on me. It's okay. We all do it, right? Checking emails and stuff like that while in presentations. It's virtual everything. But getting people to listen is really to own and understand that environment that people are listening in. What is the big picture for the team? What are some of those business goals? Where do you fit? Where is you and your expertise fitting in this environment itself? If you're an accessibility consultant where you just brought in to be put as a placeholder to support multiple teams, well, how does that align with the vision of the organization? The more you can tie in your business priorities to the vision of the company, the better the message is going to be if you tie that in. And by the way, with all the talk around diversity, equity, and inclusion these days, sometimes we even add in accessibility itself, an idea. That's a great way to start that conversation. Hey, you know, a diverse workforce is really important, right, boss? Well, accessibility is part of that conversation. I was once working at one of that large consulting firm. We had a hack happen inside the team through one of the projects that we brought in. Nothing was stolen, but we did notice the vulnerability. We patched it and got that all fixed up. I went and asked the senior director what he thought about the vulnerability afterwards. And he said, you know, Cam, when you're at my level, we don't care about the day-to-day process. I wasn't even aware of the hack. I'm caring more about what the client needs before they even know it. So when you start to realize that the higher up you go in an organization to speak their language, that's the environment that we need to be a part of in our world of accessibility. How do we align with those high-level goals? I like to think of it in 3 different ways: 3 days, 3 months, and 3 years, right? 3 days can be that end of sprint conversation. 3 months can be that end of the project or end of the release conversation. And 3 years can be the end of the 2.x guidelines in the WCAG, or, you know, end of technology lifecycle, things like that. If we can start to align our message with these types of goals, we're going to get a lot more buy-in in the way that we communicate the importance of accessibility with our clients and our projects. Because there may be deadlines that we are not even aware of. And maybe we let go of the 3-day goal to align more closely with that 3-month goal if we can get the shift left to happen even earlier. How does your solution really fit with all those goals? And finally, words. The words themselves need to be very clear and simple, because it increases audience retention when you introduce something that is really easy to understand. Because what is the biggest turnoff in business, right? It's loss of control and loss of power. It's feeling like an idiot, right? You don't want your boss to feel like an idiot, you know, even if maybe sometimes they don't listen to what's important. Well, what happens when you give someone a complex problem and they need to go and try and explain that to somebody else? If they can't explain it in their own words, you will lose the buy-in from that person, simply put, because they can't even communicate it back to someone else. There's a great book out there called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. It's a book about UX. I know all my UX friends, I get mad street cred on that. Just going to do a quick shout out here to Rebecca. She put in Emily Ladeau's book called Demystifying Disability, excellent book as well, to talk about these subjects too. But the book I was talking about, Don't Make Me Think, really highlights the fact that we need clarity on websites and mobile applications so that people are able to get through a flow, a buying process as easily as possible. And we need to do that as well when we talk to leads, to our teams, and to our clients. Everything needs to be easy and approachable. And if we need any examples in complication, we need to look no further than if ever we try and talk about guidelines in the WCAG. 1.1.1, non-text content, WCAG 2.1 level AA. This is ambiguous, and outside of our industry, nobody really knows what this means. So how do we simplify it? Bring it down to something like alternative text for graphics in the accessibility guidelines. I'll give you a tip. In fact, when I speak to people outside of our industry, I don't even say WCAG anymore. I don't say web content accessibility guidelines. I simplify that down to the accessibility guidelines. There's only one that we're talking about. I mean, yes, of course, if you're in Europe or different countries, they have different rules as to which they point to, but we are only talking about the WCAG. So shortening that down to simplify to the accessibility guidelines has helped me in the way that I communicate this message. But I think this could even be simplified further to talk about the benefits to the organization as well. What if we changed 1.1.1 to required text that improves SEO? Because that's really what it is, right? Remember, the audience is a decision maker. On screen, I've got an image of a clock. Because I know what some people may be thinking right now. This takes so much time, right? We need this change now. It needs to be done immediately. But I'll tell you, accessibility is not a race. We are trying to change company culture as we go, when we go into these organizations, where we help out with clients, when we speak to our leaders. Because really, the only thing that we can talk about is that patience plus persistence equals progress. This is the same argument as diet or exercise or saving money. Our best tool available to us is time. So patience plus persistence equals progress. I got a quote here. We overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. That's by Matthew Kelly, The Long View. Let's bring it all together here. Edmund, I see your comment there. Let's talk about that at the end. What if you're running out of both patience and persistence? Well, we can talk about that. DEI is hard. Our industry is hard. I've got a number up on screen here, 10,982. If you know what this number is, put it in the chat. This number is actually the number of lawsuits from the Americans with Disabilities Act in 2020. 10,982 equals about 30 lawsuits per day. Why do we use this number? I know it's very common to use this number in our industry. We try to tell people lots of lawsuits come in. Are we trying to shock companies? Are we trying to convince people to say, oh, wow, I know when I used to use this, we've got another one for the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AOTA, up here in Ontario, at $10,000 a day in lawsuits. I think our expectation is really to shock people to say, wow, I've been doing it all wrong. I need to care about accessibility now. But in reality, what I found is that when I go and tell this to bosses and I say, you're going to get sued, people take it like a threat. Are you going to tell on me if I don't do accessibility? In fact, I had a client once come and ask me, Cam, how many businesses in the US does ADA apply to? And I had to look it up, in fact. 32,500,000 businesses are covered by the ADA. At 30 lawsuits a day, it would take about 2,968 years to sue everybody. I don't think lawsuits are the way to the solution to getting people to care about accessibility. $10,000 a day didn't convince people up in Ontario to care either. What this did do is get me invited to less meetings. So here's another statistic that we use quite often. Over 1 billion people worldwide have a disability. And I don't like using this statistic just kind of out in the open like that. 1 billion is too large of a number for people to understand on its face value. It's 3 times the number of people in the United States, a little bit over that. People think the problem is too big. It's a deer in the headlights. They don't kind of consume it. So I want to work on a way to deliver this message a little bit better based on what we've already learned about Cassie. So here she is again. She's worried about, as in a professional life, KPIs and hiring and mentorship, strategic planning, and some of the other comments that we had as well. In her personal life, maybe she has family issues and a long commute. She's tired. She's a volunteer. She's got insomnia, things like that. So when I go to her and I say, I sent her a fun video about accessibility. And I inquired about her team and I asked her things like, when was the last time our team learned about accessibility personas? Let's have a little meeting on that. And I engaged with her and I said, hey, at the last all hands of our company, we talked about DEI. Let's get engaged with that. Let's plug in. Some of the words that I would use with her are things like goals and collaboration, easy and simple. Maybe there's some other ones that we could think of here. So when I go to her and I start talking about the over 1 billion people worldwide who have a disability, I can say, and that carousel that we have on our page doesn't work well for any of us. And once we get Cassie starting to ask the right questions, and once Cassie starts to think about accessibility first, she'll put it on her resume, and we would have helped create another champion. So just before I wrap up here, I've got an image of a light bulb up on screen. Our industry is hard. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's hard. It's burnout central, right? We've experienced that before. We give and we give and we give and we give and we give. And it's because we know it's important. And I've been broken many times in this industry. I've been talking on accessibility for 9 years now. And to hear the same thing over and over, when I go and try and convince somebody to care about accessibility, and when it finally goes through, they get a promotion and someone brand new comes in it, and I'm starting right back at zero. It's happened to me before. I know it's happened to you before as well. But last year, more organizations than ever before have been talking about accessibility with less resistance than ever before as well. Change is happening. We need to revel in that coaching and creating champions. You can use something like View to calibrate your communications as well. So how do you not get burned out and feel stuck? If you do, reach out, talk to somebody about it, get mentorship, find someone who has worked through it before, get help, learn some new skills. And I promise you, things like these soft skills are going to work better in your consulting, in your advocacy, in your interpersonal relationships than learning pure technical skills. And with that, my name is Cam Baudouin. I try and post daily on LinkedIn. If ever you'd like some more tips on accessibility, I try and make accessibility fun and approachable. And with that, I'll hand it back to Malcolm for the end show. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Cam. I think we had a couple questions in the chat if we've got some time. There was one about the short form of acronyms and alt text. I think where to include that. And then if you want to go ahead and take that question, I can circle back through chat.
Yeah, I love this question because there is no answer to it. And I love it because whenever I ask about or talk about acronyms, how do we do it? Okay, does anyone know IBM? I'll use IBM as an example. What's IBM's full name? Does anyone know? Pop it in the chat right now. I'll do going once, going twice. IBM stands for International Business Machines. International Business Machines. Yeah, Jamie, you got it first. I don't go around saying I used to work for International Business Machines. I say I used to work for IBM. But there's a catch there. At what point does an acronym become part of regular vernacular? So that's something that we need to judge as well. Up here in Canada, the CNIB used to stand for the Canadian National Institute of the Blind. But I believe it was in 2010 that they changed the name to the CNIB Association, or excuse me, the CNIB Foundation. They're no longer the Canadian National Institute of the Blind. They are officially the CNIB. So it's no longer, you cannot call them the first name anymore. So when acronyms become part of normal vernacular, that's when you no longer need to describe them using some other kind of text. But what I like to say is if ever they become complicated, like no one outside of our industry really knows what the WCAG is. So I always try and state the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or I shorten it down to the Accessibility Guidelines as much as possible. Clarity and simplicity over everything. If ever I need to explain something through acronyms, I'm trying to explain it as much as I can somewhere in that text or somewhere in that presentation as well. Great question.
And there was another, this is Malcolm again. There was another question in chat asking about the fun video that was mentioned earlier. And if you could maybe dive into that a little bit more.
Sure. I saw someone post it here. Just give me one moment. Yes. So just the SD was all it was. The RNIB, what's in store. Everyone should have the right to know what they're buying. What I'll do here is I will repost it in the chat right now, just alerting everyone. It's a YouTube link. Thank you, SB. Like I appreciate you sending me that. Everyone should go have a look towards this because I sent this video to more people than I think any other one. And it's just about 2 minutes. And it just goes and demonstrates what the lived experience is like to someone who cannot read product labels. And it was so in the UK, a pop-up store was created, and you can imagine a store where there's candy bars and chocolates and cans of pop and stuff like that too, and there's no labels on anything. And when people would approach the cash and say, "Well, what is this?" and the cashier said, "I don't know what's inside." Well, that's a lived experience of somebody. So watch the video and send it to people who are having a hard time convincing of accessibility. It'll at least open up that conversation. Thank you.
This is Malcolm again. There's one question in the Q&A. What are the 3 most common questions you ask your team members about their role in the project to guide accessibility into the conversation?
All right, so 3 most common questions. I have to understand what they know about accessibility. What is their baseline? So I'll ask simple questions, leading questions like, okay, well, who does screen reader testing on this team? Something as simple as that. Now, we know that screen readers don't represent disabilities as a whole. We know that, but it is a question for something that is tactile, something that's actionable and usable by lots of people. And by the way, I think that I will have some answers to this. If you would like to pitch in here, please put your some of the answers in the chat. I'd love to hear what other people think of as well. The question was, what are the top 3 questions that I would ask a team when I would approach them and start talking about consultancy? Put extra answers in the chat. I think this is a great discussion. Number 2, I'm going to ask who really owns accessibility on this team? Because sometimes we don't realize that our boss, the team lead, may have somebody else above them who has to do things like budget approvals or buy-in as well. And they may not even own planning in the organization too, or on their team. They may be beholden to other people, other leads, other VPs that need to make these buying decisions as well. So we may say, I need all versions of JAWS. Like every developer on my team needs JAWS. Well, that's going to take some buy-in as well. So understanding who really owns accessibility as well is a big part of it. And then number 3 is, can I get involved as early as possible? That's going to be my 3rd question. So if a typical agile team of developers, designers, content creators, QA, and a lead, something like that, I'm going to try and be best friends with the designers as early as possible, so I can get them to start to include accessibility in their wireframes and in their deliverables as early as possible, because that just helps down the line, as we know. So I'm going to start asking, where do designs come from? How do I get involved as early as possible with that? Now, sidebar. You may not be involved in that. Maybe you work for something like a WordPress shop, a dev shop, where all you're doing is building and you don't have an actual design team either. So I would be checking and try to get involved as early as possible with whatever wireframes that I have possible to me. So those are the types of questions that I'm asking, leading questions, trying to get involved early, try and place myself and befriend the people who matter. Maybe I can just take a moment here, Malcolm, before getting to the next question. Valerie asked questions like, whose responsibility is accessibility? Let's see what else we have here. Josh said, did we talk about when we sold did we talk about accessibility when we sold the project? That's another really good one. Thanks, Josh. That's a really good one. And yes, I think that's all the other comments on there. Great. Yeah. On to the next one, Malcolm.
This is Malcolm. There is a question related or 2 questions that are similar. One is for higher education and one is working in government. Mm-hmm. And they're asking that one of the problems they have is creating a narrative of the success and movement that they've had to get people jump onto the success train. It's hard because the higher ups want accessibility, but don't know, or perhaps know, the concepts because it's beneath them. Mm-hmm. And how do we get senior leadership that wants to be accessible but doesn't listen or prioritize it to get it into the flow?
Great. Thanks, Malcolm. This is Cam again. Okay. So one thing that I've learned through experience is that all, let's call them higher ups across many organizations, be it government, higher education, big business, banking, finance, all these large institutions are going to have a few things in common. Number 1 is going to be the speed at which they operate. That's always going to have to be something that you take into account, because they'll operate at a much slower speed than at the team level or a smaller dev shop and stuff like that. So respecting the speed of the organization is something to keep in mind always with this type of conversation. But number two, you have to think about what are the priorities of those leaders. And when we're talking about multi-layers of decision-making or leadership, when you get to that VP level, they will have so many people beneath them. They may even have a team of someone who just helps support their decision-making processes. So you have to understand that you'll be speaking in terms of years, maybe even decades in some situations, and not in terms of days or months. So your buy-in process will be much different. What you may want to lead with is getting their buy-in to speak to some of their subordinates at a more effective level. Get the buy-in of the VP to be able to speak to the senior director and the director levels at a more productive or hands-on approach type levels, because the VP is, even if you have buy-in at the VP level, they are not going to be making decisions on buying, licenses for JAWS or even hiring practices. They might, don't get me wrong. A VP of HR will be making decisions, but will probably not be getting on the phone, interviewing people to bring on as testers or things like that. So really understanding and getting involved in what's important at that level, some of their goals. And it's actually easier to find their goals than you may think. A lot of organizations will publicly post what their business goals are, or their achievements are, or what their business kind of where they're going within the next 5 to 10 years. All those missions and goals are usually publicly available. So the closer you can tie in your message around accessibility to those VP levels, the high levels with that, you can have a lot of success for that, I promise.
This is Malcolm again. We had one person who wanted to ask a question live, so I'm going to give them permission to unmute themselves.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm from Sri Lanka, and probably this may not be same for many other countries, but there is this incident when we sort of advocate for sort of equal opportunities in work and in other various engagements. There are people who sort of rather than empathetic, they are more sympathetic, and they try to give us the opportunity. And sometimes just for the sort of emotional appeal of it, we try to make them as into champions of sort of pioneering on our behalf to sort of promote and convince others about the inclusion of persons with disabilities. But at the end of the day, sometimes these people take it upon themselves to be judgmental, and they think they have gotten some expertise and enough exposure to pass judgments on people with disabilities without actually consulting them, and most of their judgments end up being relating to sort of one size fit all kind of very stereotypical approaches. So how would you suggest that we navigate this kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Maybe I can sum it up and just let me know if I got that correct. So the question really is around, there are lots of people coming into this industry right now, and they come in with different skills and abilities, and sometimes only what they've learned maybe online, virtually, something like that, without really understanding what somebody with a disability may actually experience. And how do we go and approach those people and talk about that? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. So for people like that, that's a really difficult question. And it's not one that I get very often. I always assume that people have the best intentions at heart. I don't think that people enter, well, actually, at least I haven't experienced, people really coming into this industry and saying, I'm just in it for a quick buck. I don't think that really makes sense. I'm sure it exists out there. Maybe we can all share some stories later. But I want to assume that people are trying to understand what someone's lived experience is and how to help people. I think that's the main intent here. So leading with that empathy level first, and understanding that, hey, you're saying, for example, You're saying in your presentation, in your lunch and learn, and the way that you've done this, that you only need to test with the screen reader because that's all that's important. That'll cover all of accessibility. Actually, that only represents a certain percentage of people with disabilities. We need to go in and look at other things. I would put it on them. I would say, well, how put some of those situations and exposing some areas, some gaps in their knowledge, not publicly, but just asking very pointedly, like, well, how would somebody with colorblindness approach the situation? How would somebody with vertigo approach parallax? And asking much more situational questions to these people will help expose some of the gaps in their knowledge, and you can help guide them towards like some better practices on how to make things accessible for people of any ability. That's how I would approach that situation. It may not be the only way, but that's how I would probably start to work through that. I hope that helped. That was a good question. That's not something I encounter too often.
Thank you.
This is Malcolm. I think we have time for one more question. There's one in the Q&A. What strategies do you employ other than persistence and patience when there may be repeated activities but no movement towards accessibility over time?
Well, there's a saying, right? You have two choices when you do something. You can lead with the carrot or you can lead with the stick. And after a while, there's no choice. We have to start leading with the stick. But I tend to not have to do that too often these days. There's just so much evidence out there that will lead people to making some of these right decisions. But that may just be my lived experience with the organizations that I've worked with. I can admit that. Now, where do you go? Moving up higher in the organization, getting buy-in from higher up may be your best solution at that point. How high do you need to go? Well, LinkedIn, for example, is a very large place. I've heard stories from other accessibility professionals who've gone off and asked directors and higher levels just out for coffee and started to explain the benefits of that, the business benefits of accessibility, and that helps trickle down buy-in from a smaller team. I can put other examples forward as well, where maybe at the team level, there are deliverables that need to be handled in the short term. We need to get X number of tickets done before the end of the sprint. This is how we don't have time for accessibility. Well, how can I get easier buy-in from the developer? How can I make things easier, really? So instead of tackling something like a carousel or a date picker or a table that's already broken, maybe I'll start with something really easy and I'll hammer in labels. I'll get labels so good with a team of developers that they have no choice but to do it. And I'll be the label guy for a little while. Once I can start making things easy for a team, then generally speaking, what happens is that door starts to, their armor starts to crack. I mean, the door starts to open and more buy-in starts to happen. But I don't have a direct answer. I'm not going to go in and start kicking down doors and start throwing lawsuits or saying that people will get sued anymore. That's always a warning in back of people's minds, and I think people are aware of it nowadays. So really, just reinforcing the communication as well is the technique that I've used more. But I definitely understand and appreciate what it's been like in my past as a consultant when you feel like you're out of patience and out of persistence, and you got to start leveraging a little bit more hard-lined approaches. Maybe something I would approach with is every couple of days sending out emails again, publicly announcing to the team of where some of the problems are and how we can fix those as well. Maybe something you could use.
Thank you very much, Cam. Going to share my screen. And I want to thank Cam for such an informative and great presentation. It was fantastic to see so much activity and questions come in from the chat. For upcoming IAAP webinars in our digital accessibility series, we have on June 30th, pitfalls of machine-generated PDFs. On July 27th, developing industry consensus standards for accessibility reporting. And on August 9th, making healthcare services and telemedicine accessible for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. And I want to once again thank Cam for his time today. And I also want to thank our lovely support team, Beth, for her great job doing the ASL interpretation, and Julia for her work with the captioning. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.